Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Unfiltered Vet Discussions. My name is Kelly Baltzell, and today I am the host, and I have Kim Delaney with me. This is a new Unfiltered Vet Discussion format. Typically, we run for 20 minutes, and we have a panel of us having, questions battered back and forth and thoughts and whatnot. We're starting a new series that's typically around 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and we're doing a little bit more deeper dive on a singular issue, and or we also have a guest in at the same time. So welcome, Kim. Welcome to the podcast today.
Thank
It's
you.
lovely to be here. I personally have known Kim for a really, 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 really long time, over 10 years. And as typical in the vet space, it's a small space that services a large group of people. Um, so Kim and I have had multiple discussions, but one of the discussions that we've been having this year a lot together is she was working for a practice that was sold, which is not uncommon these days in the veterinary space. But what we've kind of honed in on is the emotional aftermath of selling a practice. And I've seen rumors of it. I might see a question pop up on a message board here or there. I see people chatting about it at a convention, but nobody just really brings it up and goes, okay, what happens after the ink is signed on a piece of paper? There's a lot of hoopla about before the sale or during the sale or should you sell? And those are not the conversations we're having today. Instead, it's like after the sale and what happens to the human beings that are involved in it. So, Kim, let's start off with how would you like the world to know about you today? Can you give us a little bit of an introduction?
Sure. Well, I am a CVPM. I have been in the veterinary industry my entire life. My father was a veterinarian, and bought our practice when I was at the ripe old age of 3. And I worked with him my entire life. I always joke that I was finally put on the payroll at 14 years old, after volunteering the decade before that. Um, but it was a great journey and a wonderful thing to see a practice go through so many stages of growth, and to be able to experience that growth myself, going from working in a kennel and scooping poop and feeding dogs to working the front desk to working in exam rooms to becoming the admin assistant and then the practice manager and earning my CVPM. It was really a wonderful journey. So I've been able to experience so much growth, not only in our own practice, but throughout the industry, and just seeing how it's grown medically, how it's grown um, through staffing positions. It's really been amazing how everybody has band together through recessions and pandemics and everything else. It's truly an amazing industry to be in, and I couldn't imagine being anywhere else. So now, after being in the same practice for 35 years, I have moved out on my own, and have been doing some consulting and some implementation help with other practices, but really just looking to see how I can continue to help the industry as a whole rather than just in one practice.
Wonderful. Thank you. So let's walk through a little bit about after the sale, because there are people who are perhaps listening to this thinking about selling. There are people who know sales happen, but really don't understand what happens because it's one thing knowing something, another thing living it, right?
Yeah.
And then also the conversations that aren't really being spoken out loud in the room because nobody really knows how to have the conversation. I don't think it's totally deliberate. I think there's a lot of can we talk about this? Or what else is somebody going to judge me on the other side if I have this conversation? Is it okay to have this conversation? Right? Like there's a
Right.
lot of questions about just even speaking after the sale, and nobody really knows where to land, actually, is
Mhm.
kind of what I've seen. Maybe a few people have figured this out, but at least in my world, we haven't seen it yet. And you and I have had a lot of conversations, which made me say, hey, Kim, let's have this conversation. Maybe maybe some other people will listen to this and go, oh my gosh, I understand this because I've lived it. Or maybe I'm not going crazy. Maybe I'm not, losing my mind because this is part of the normal process of after the sale, right?
Right.
And it's messy, it's emotionally messy. So let's talk about after the sale. So before we were recording, I was saying, okay, let's start with after the sale. And you're like, I said, what were the emotions? What were the expectations? And what did you live? Can you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, and I think, again, I was in a very unique position where being the daughter of one of the two owners, I knew about the sale before there was a sale. I knew who was courting for the sale of the practice. I was very much in it from the beginning. Um, so I was also privy to a lot of information that other people aren't. And I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, to be honest with you. Sometimes I do think there are situations that the more you know, the worse it is. But leading up to the sale, there were many, many meetings. And for a lot of you that have sold practices, I'm sure that you know as well that you actually do start having meetings between your teams and the new owner prior to the papers even being signed or the final sale date and things like that, because they're really getting you ready for that sale date you become theirs. Um, so there was a lot of discussion about, transition and support and, keeping your autonomy and doing things the way you've always done them because that's what they purchased. A lot of things like that. And then after the sale, it for lack of better words, it was very frustrating most of the time. And I think a lot of us have felt this because we're still just trying to run the business, right? We're still trying to see our patients, take care of our teams and our staffs, just like we always have. But now there's a whole new set of tasks to complete to transition the practice over, a whole new group of people that you're meeting with that you haven't worked for the last decade with, and to, in your mind, other than the financials, really know nothing about your practice and its culture and everything else. So it's almost like you start doing the job of two to three people when you're still one person. And a lot of that support comes in meetings every other week or once a month or 10 emails a day, and not the boots on the ground support or the let me show you how to do it. It's just I want this document done kind of support. So it does become very frustrating because you're also trying to manage your own emotions. And I tell people all the time, I had no naive ideas that my dad and his partner were going to own the practice until I was retiring myself. Like that was just not that's not what you do in business. And I knew that because of New Jersey state laws too, with needing to be a veterinarian to own a practice, that myself purchasing the practice was never going to be an option as well. Um, so I'm dealing with my own emotions of a family business, ending, and also trying to manage the emotions of my team. What does this mean? What does this mean? Because I do think the truth of it is, most of us have really only heard the scary about corporate. And I don't think that it's all scary.
Oh,
I think change is scary in general. I thrive on it, um sometimes in different ways. I'm not one of those people that, if you say I want to change this immediately, I'm going to jump on board and do it exactly that way, but I will eventually get to that change. I think that change is inevitable and that's how we grow, and it's great, but I think it's very, very scary for our team. So trying to manage my own emotional stress and then also theirs while also trying to report to the new owners was, I think, really not something that I was well prepared for.
yeah. And it almost sounds like there's a definition gap there, because we hear things as human beings the way we interpret them through our own lenses, right? So if the
Right.
corporation says, hey, we're going to give you support, you as the human hearing that is going to interpret that, well, this is the support that I think, like, I'm going to interpret it in the way I want the support,
Right.
right? And
Right.
their definition of support and your definition of support may not match. They may not be together, right?
Right.
So,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, and so maybe one of the things to help on the other side for the transition and the healing and the emotions that are involved is maybe get an idea of what that support actually means. Like
Mhm.
be on, you have to be honest with yourself first. Like you as Kim is like, I expect support to be this because this is my definition of support, right? Like you are
Right.
the only person who can say what support means to you. And
Mhm.
then matching it up and seeing if there's some common ground or a bridge or something that needs to be addressed there, right? Because
Right.
it sounds like for in your case, in your, you're a case study of one, if there was some maybe better understanding there, maybe knowing who you are, you would have created bridges in the place for implementation after the sale if you understood that better, right? So there's some
Yeah.
definition pieces there, and
Mhm.
it's an emotional time. And even before the sale, you're processing a lot of emotions. And like you said, you knew about it, and a lot of people
Yeah.
don't. But on the other, so getting an understanding of what you personally need or the team needs
Mhm.
sounds like an opportunity for
Yeah.
people going through this of just sitting down and going emotionally, like finances aside, emotionally,
Mhm.
what does my team need to go
Right.
from A to B? What's that bridge, right?
Right.
It sounds like a lot of work, but it sounds like if you can do that work, maybe the process and the transition and the mental health of everybody might land in a better spot. Is that
Yeah.
true, do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, it was very, I think that that's a great way to put it. It was very difficult, especially being the practice manager. And I'm sure a lot of listeners are more in that admin leadership sort of role, but having your team always be able to come to you for answers and you always being the one to either decide on those answers or have just one more person that you need to consult with to get the answer to them quickly. To basically, it was like I felt like for the first 6 months, every time I met with a team member that had a question, I had to respond by saying, I'm not quite sure, but as soon as they let me know, I'll let you know. And that was a really hard place to come from because I think that that also creates more emotions and more fear. That the person that used to have 90% of the answers for me now doesn't have the answers or any answers herself. And I was really fortunate that I had a team that very much trusted me uh and our leadership group. I had a partner and management below me as well, and they really trusted all of us. And we kind of really did the best we could. But I had them coming to me a lot of times, and I was fortunate to have them show me, the encouragement to say, hey, this is hard on us, so we can't imagine how it is for you, kind of a thing, and really acknowledging that. So I definitely had some great support from my team, which was awesome, but it was very difficult sort of grasping. And again, I had a friend that I went on a business trip with 3 weeks ago, used a really amazing term for herself that I loved. And I don't mean to steal it, but she said that she's a change of file. And I love that because I really do believe that change is the most important thing in the world. But I believe that there is a right way to do change, and everybody's right is not the same.
Mhm.
And I think was a very difficult thing from the corporate standpoint to coming into a private practice. Because while I was prepared for all of the change, I also knew my team and how they would need to address each change. Whereas a lot of the times you're being told this is the change, make it happen and make it happen within this time frame and this parameters. And that doesn't always work for everybody. unfortunately. So it was very difficult, and there were a lot of emotions, and I felt like I spent the majority of the time trying to protect my team, not even thinking about myself half the time, which really wears on yourself
Mm-hmm.
a lot too. There's a lot of I am absolutely the worst when it comes to leading by example and self-care, you know?
Right.
So I think that that was just really hard. So I think just having more clarification on roles and responsibilities and what that support looks like. And um, I don't necessarily feel like that can be accomplished in remote meetings once to twice a month, emailing back and forth. I think that when it really, again, it's going to be different across the board. It's going to depend upon the size of your practice, the scope of it. We have a very large practice, and I felt that that sometimes needs a little more attention than a practice that may be 2 to 3 doctors and 7 to 10 support staff.
Right.
So I think that there was definitely a lot of growing pains. Um, and I also felt that for myself emotionally, it was very difficult because I went from a place of continuous um, personal growth through starting in a kennel to working up to being the practice manager and you know um, the owners stepping back from practice and even management. I mean, they got to a point where they were taking 3 to 4 months off a year each, so we were really the leaders in the practice making the decisions to a point where it basically what happened was my growth stopped.
But I'm going to pick up there
Yeah.
because after the sale, there's a lot of changes. Like this happens
Mhm.
all the time. New entity comes in, they have a vision, and the new vision gets absorbed by the entity that they've purchased.
Right.
Not everybody sticks because it's not a good fit anymore. And that's a natural,
Mhm.
like you said, change is inevitable. That's a natural part of it. So I want people to hear if you're one
Yeah.
of those people in this place and you're like, I don't feel like I fit anymore, you probably don't, you
And
know,
that's okay.
and that's okay, right? It's okay to give yourself the permission and empowerment to say, I need to go find my next step in my next journey in life. Okay, does
Yeah.
it suck? Probably. Are you going to
Mhm.
cry? Probably. Are you going to grieve? Most likely, right? Because you're saying
Absolutely.
goodbye to a chapter of your life,
Mhm.
but trying to hold on to it tears you apart because it's not, you're not going to win that one. I can just tell
Yeah.
you right now, you're just making the runway longer to
Mhm.
walking out the door, right?
Yep.
Because the universe has a new plan for you.
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of what happened to you. Like you went through that transition piece and you're like, okay, I left. That part is behind me now. And then you wake up and you're looking at your Wheaties going, now what?
Yeah.
Right.
I was definitely in it a lot longer than I should have been.
Okay.
Yeah. And it is, and it's difficult because um again, like you said, this was a huge chapter of my life. It's really a huge chapter of anybody's life that is part of a sale. We don't It's not a change that we really get any say in,
Which
even
is
the sale
hard.
portion. It's
That's
very,
hard.
very hard. It's like having a bad breakup that that is still there. You still have to see it every day. I still bring my pets to the practice because this is the practice I built. I still love the team. It's still the same medicine that we built over 35 years. So it is very hard, but there's definitely, and there were absolutely growing pains for myself afterwards. The grieving process is hard. It's very hard. And I've been just about 6 to 8 months, and I don't know that it's not still going on every now and again. But it's definitely opened my eyes to the amount of possibilities still out there in vet med, which was really, really wonderful. And it's allowed me to experience not just regular growth, but really building myself up from the growth that I lost over the last year of just trying to keep my head above water and take care of the practice. Um, so there's definitely some joy in it as well.
Right. And I think that's kind of the hard part, right? Because you're in this emotional stew and you're not the only one in the stew pot, right?
Right.
Like there's other people going through their own emotions in the stew pot along with you and trying to figure out what's up, what's down, where's my boundaries, where do I
Right.
fit in, how do I feel about it, what's next, right? So you can be scared because you don't know what's next. Or you can go, wow, I'm going to open myself up to future possibilities. Like, what side of the coin are you looking at? Right. And,
Right.
and you're going to flip back and forth. You're not always going to be able to stick to one side or the other because we're human
Yeah.
beings and we all have days. Right. But when that hurting moment happens, I think you got to give yourself some grace, correct? I mean,
Absolutely.
and not like I think our natural inclination is to beat ourselves up. Where did I go wrong? Why am I a failure? Why couldn't I stick it out? Why don't they like me? Like I'm not seeing any positives words here. I'm saying all the negative words.
Yeah.
And the reality is, if you can step back, is it's just not a good fit anymore. Like you used a relationship, right? Like a bad
Mhm.
breakup. There are some amazing people we have all dated in our lives, probably most of them, unless, they're psychotic people who should be in prisons. But most of them, you dated them for a reason, right? And then at one point, you're just not growing in the same direction anymore. And it's just not a fit anymore. And it's
Yeah.
being okay within yourself to say it's not a fit. I'm going to say it's not a fit. I'm going to own it. It's not a fit. I can go through my emotions, but if we stay in the stew pot for longer than we should, it becomes detrimental for
Yeah.
our, right? And then you
Oh,
can't get out of the stew
completely.
pot,
Mhm.
right?
And I'll say a lot of those things too. The hardest part of it is that you don't realize a lot of those things until you're out of it. You just think that this is the norm and how you should be functioning through life. And having people to talk to about it and to be blatantly honest about it. I remember Kelly, you were one of the first people that I really talked to and met with like less than 2 weeks after. And just being able to be bluntly honest about things like I, was relieved about the fact that for 2 weeks I wasn't woken up by a phone call at 6 a.m. every morning from somebody calling out, and these are things that I didn't even realize were dragging me down for so long, working so much, the hours, the being available to people, all of the things. I had just always taken it upon myself that that was part of my job as the practice manager, as the team mom, as seeing our business through this transition because it's very difficult even when you're a year plus out to stop considering it your business when you've been in it for so long. So I didn't even realize how many of those things were detrimental to me until they were no longer there.
Mm.
So the relief that I experienced afterwards was really quite wonderful. And not to say that's everybody's. I hope that's nobody's else's, situation. But you have to I love when you said it to me to give you reminded me to give myself some grace.
Mhm.
Um you know we I think that as a industry as a whole this is somewhat of a fault of ours, a beautiful fault, but we invest our whole selves in it. And it is an emotional business. It's a business centered on relationships and service. not just with our clients, but with our team. I I don't know that I've ever been in a practice where half the team wasn't super close friends with each other, doing things on the weekends and meeting out for dinner and, going to each other's weddings and baby showers. And like, they really do become a friendship and a family unit. So we give so much of ourselves that sometimes we forget to differentiate between what is my work person and what is my self person. And um that's where I needed the most grace, I think, was because I felt like I as a person had, not been able to see through what I wanted to.
Mhm, mhm. And
So I
that was
think
a
that there's
grief
a
point right there for you.
it's a
Yeah,
huge grieving point.
yeah. And you gotta let, I mean, just like in every relationship, you need to heal from the one you left before
Mhm.
you embrace the other one totally, right? Or there's
Absolutely.
no room to bring in the new because the old is still cluttering up the emotional closet
Yeah,
inside,
absolutely.
right?
Hmm.
And also, um, the inner journey. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Like having to look at your own self inwards, like tending your own
Sure.
garden. Like, how did you clean out some space so you could leave in the new?
I think I'm probably still doing that from time to time. I mean, it's kind of like, gutting out your house. Spring cleaning happens like 3 times a year, and it's definitely not the spring. But there is a lot, and it's very difficult. There's a lot, especially if you're somebody who's been with one practice for so long as I had been. There's a lot of realizing that, again, they're not all cookie cutter, right?
Mhm.
They're not all the same. There's a lot of there's a lot of recognizing things that you could have done differently yourself that may have made the situation better. Maybe it made would have made the situation worse. You're never going to know those things, but there's a lot of those what if questions going through your head, or should I have questions going through your head. Um I think for me it was really um, I read a really amazing book actually about hospitality called Unreasonable Hospitality, written by the previous owner of 11 Madison Park in New York City. And he starts the book by talking about not looking for what you don't want, but looking for what you do. So, really kind of sitting down and setting aside to myself, like, my first step before I had read that was all the I don't ever want to work 7 days a week again. I don't want to work 70 hours a week again. Even if it's for 2 weeks, that's not what I want to do. I don't want to be beholden to such a strict schedule that I'm planning my family around my work life. Those were things that were really important to me. At one point, I said, I don't want to be responsible for anybody else. Like, I was literally ready to walk down the street and be a CSR or a kennel tech somewhere, just so that I didn't have any true responsibility to take care of another team. Um, but when I started to flip the narrative, is when I really kind of felt like I could start growing and healing and know what was going to be next for me. When I said, well, I still want to work for a practice and I still want to be able to bring some help to leadership, because that's help to the team is the hugest passion of mine, and the leaders get the least amount of help, right? The further up the rung you get, the less help there is because there's less people on the top to help you, basically. Um, so I knew that that was something I wanted to do. I do love traveling, and I haven't always been able to, not only because of having an in clinic work schedule, but also from being a mom and having a young child for a long time. Now my son is raised and out of the house, so I have the availability to travel. So I was like, that's something that I might want to do or open myself up to be able to do. Um, and just really starting to make that list of what do I want instead of what do I not want? And those things kept creeping in, trust me, but really flipping the verbiage instead of saying I don't want to work a 70-hour week to saying I do want to work a 40-hour week still,
Mhm.
you know. Um I don't want to have, consulting is a little bit more scary than I think some people make it out to be. You have to make sure that you have clients lined up, but you also have to make sure that you have the time to give to your clients. So, at first I was like, I don't want to take on than 2 to 3 clients at a time. And then I changed that narrative and I said, I'm going to take on 1 client at a time. So just making sure that I knew what was going to be feasible for me. And then also, most importantly, every time I wrote something on the I do want for my professional life, I put 2 things on the I do want for my personal life because I felt like my personal life had taken such a back seat over not just through the sale and everything, but with COVID, I think many of us who manage a business or own a business, that becomes our priority, and we all kind of put ourselves aside for that. So that was kind of what I did to kind of help clean the emotional house. And there were times where something would come up that I was like, oh, I'm really going to miss that. I'm going to miss that aspect of it. And you have to just grieve through it. And, just like a breakup or even a loss, you just kind of say, let's focus on the positive and the memories from it and move on. It's definitely not easy. It doesn't happen overnight. Like I said, 6 to 8 months later, I'm still going through it. Probably still will for the next 6 to 8 months. But, I do think that that was one way that really helped me was to stop looking at everything that I lost and didn't want to have to do again, but to start looking at the parts that I really enjoyed and loved and was looking forward to,
So
if that
you
makes
empowered
sense.
yourself,
Yeah.
right?
And I had to because there's not many people that are going to do it for you,
Like
you
at
know,
all, is there?
at all.
Like, and I think that's kind of a myth in our society. Like we
Yeah.
just need to sit, wait, put our hands on our lap. It's like the little ladies at the bus station. They just put their sensible person there in their lap,
Yeah.
and have their sensible shoes, and they're
Yep.
just waiting for the bus to show up, right?
Yeah.
They're just waiting, and that is a myth. Like
Yeah.
the
And you know what? The bus is always going to show up. Your friends are always going to be there and your team's going to be there and things like that. But they're grieving with you.
Mhm.
And they're not necessarily always they're looking to take care of you in the moment that you're in. And if the moment that you're in is the grief aspect the whole time, then that's all they're helping you with, which is totally needed. I'm not saying there's not a purpose and they're not doing their job as your friends or your family or your team, but um I just feel that you have to be able to step out of it yourself to get everybody else on board to continue to support you. When I decided that I went on LinkedIn and I looked at the jobs in the area and I maybe applied for 1 or 2 that I knew I really didn't want to do, but I said, you've got to get yourself back out there again, and see what's going on. And when I took the time and I really decided, you know what, I have this amount of time to figure something out that I feel like I can comfortably survive and live and really just work on myself and make that list of what I'm looking for. And I was fortunate that the client sort of evolved during that time. So I did have something to look forward to, but I didn't feel the rush. And once I was like, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I want to focus on, all of those people on the bus were like, let me do your marketing for you. Let me set up a website for you. Let me make business cards for you. Do you want me to talk to this team person for you? And it was really great. And so like I said, I think that you really definitely have to make the decision yourself because your people are always going to meet you where you're at.
That's an
They're
excellent
just trying
point.
to support
Yep.
you where you're at. And And quite honestly, you don't necessarily want them to do any different, because I don't know about you, but nothing irks me more than when I'm in a place I've decided that's the place I'm going to be, right? Whether it's grief, whether it's anger, whether it's happiness, whatever, that is the place I am going to be. And if I'm grieving and you come in and you're trying to give me the rainbows and roses of the situation, my grief is just going to turn to anger, and I'm not going to want to talk to you or bring you into it for a while. But if you sit down next to me and just commiserate with me and like, I'm so sorry, let's, go grab dinner, or let's just sit here and watch a sappy movie together, that is the support that you need at the time, right? So that's what your friends and your family and your team are for. But the definite growth, I mean, and it's not easy and it's not magical. And I have no real advice as to how to get to it, except for to just make it be in the back of your mind that at some point, it's okay to grieve and it's okay to take the time you need, but at some point you got to get up and throw on real clothes, take the dog for a walk, and say, something's got to change today,
One step at a time.
one step at a time.
Like, even if you only know the next step, it's still a step,
It's still a step.
right? Because,
Yeah,
but if you don't take the step, no steps are being taken.
exactly.
Yeah. And your journey has shown you that. I mean,
Yeah.
knowing your journey, you've taken one step,
Hmm.
you stood there, looked around, and go, oh, there's the next step. There's the next one I'm going to take. Right.
Yep.
And then you take that step and you look around, you're like, do I like this step? Yeah, I
Hmm.
kind of do. This feels kind of good. It's a little
Yeah.
unusual. It's outside of my comfort zone, but I'm going to, and I think that's partly it. It's you're going to probably feel uncomfortable.
Hmm.
You
And
know,
I've had a lot of discomfort. It is not comfortable going from a team that has known you practically your whole life, or a team of people that you've had one hand or the other in hiring every person on the team, or been part of the conversation throughout all of it, to working with an entirely new team of people that don't know you, you don't know them, um, you know, presenting things that imposter syndrome is real. It's real, it's out there, we're all suffering from it. So it's been really uncomfortable making recommendations to a team that I didn't build, trying to institute change, and leading workshops and all of these things that I didn't really have the opportunity to do over the last 5 years or with my own team ever. So it's definitely been uncomfortable, but it's it's also been really fun, and it's been really empowering. And I definitely question myself a lot, and I definitely am someone who still needs a lot of reassurance, and I'm thankful so much that I've been getting it and have had surrounded myself by a team that's been encouraging and supportive, in the client, between the client that I have taken on, people that I used to work with, Kelly, just leaders in the industry in general. That's, my new support system. That's my new team. That's the people that I go to when I have a question now, and need a little encouragement or somebody to bounce ideas off of. So it's really been quite a lovely journey, as scary as it was in the beginning.
and looking back, you never knew this is where you'd be today if you didn't
Never.
take the step, right?
Nope. Nope.
No.
I would have been in my practice for probably another 5 to 10 years easily.
And look at where you are today.
Yeah. And it's wonderful. I am getting to travel. I am
It's on
getting
your list, right? That was
which
on.
was on my list. I am getting time with my family. I'm going on my first real vacation in 2 weeks, like no Wi-Fi, no, laptops, nothing, for the first time in probably about 4 or 5 years. So, it's exciting. I don't work many weekends anymore, which is lovely. I'm not on call very often. I mean, I definitely still keep myself available for my clients, um, to a certain standpoint, but it's just I feel like I have some breathing room and some relief to work on more things for me. I became a CCFP last month. Um, which is something that I'd been wanting to do and sit down and go through the training because I think that compassion fatigue is definitely something that we all go through, and being able to recognize it more for others and for yourself is really important. I've been working on some other certifications that I've just put aside, and it's just really nice to be able to continue to learn and grow myself because that's something that I think we all need, especially in an industry that's forever changing.
Mhm. So wrapping up today, what would your advice be to people who are starting the sale journey or in the middle of it or in the emotional soup on the other side? Just overall, what would be your summary knowing the path you've been walking?
Well, I think, from the start of it with the sale and the transition of your team, just really asking for as much clarity and support from the new owner as possible when you have questions, pushing and saying, "Hey, I need help with this. I'm not saying no. I just need help and I need more assistance and I need more clarification on things." And keeping those open lines of communication with your team, um, making sure that you have a support person that you can break down to when need to and celebrate with when need to. Because again, as the leadership, there's only so much that you can professionally tell to your team under you or the people that you're trying to promote yourself to. So making sure that you have your people in place, and then making sure that throughout the entire time it is still the right fit for you. That was a huge thing. Making sure that you're not cutting corners with your own core values, your own vision for your future. Recognizing that your vision of the future might be different than it should be different than the business's vision. Like you need to have your own personal goals. I mean, we do this with our team from the moment we hire them. What are your goals for growth? Why aren't we doing them for ourselves?
Right?
you know, and making sure that you really stay loyal to those. And, if it comes time to move on, let yourself grieve. Don't think that it's weak or that it's, unprofessional to sit there and cry about it and to get angry and to go through all the different stages. Give yourself the grace and the time to do all of that, and then really make sure that if you haven't set a date to do it, or if you haven't set some sort of a time period to say, there has to be a moment that I snap out of this. And what do I think that moment might look like? Again, for me, it literally was just, I am going to get out of my house today and I am going to put on real clothes and I'm going to walk my dog instead of just letting her out into the backyard. And I did that every day for a week. And then I was like, well, this is boring. So I've got to find something else to do now, and then you just keep building on it. But you definitely have to make the decision for yourself. And the support will come with it. The support is always going to be where you're at. So I think that was a really important lesson for me.
Most awesome. Well, thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
This has been a lovely conversation, and I hope it's inspired other people listening to this to have conversations yourself, right? That's kind of what I encourage Kim to do is like, let's just talk about this. Like, just talking brings out power, and just finding the right people to talk to who will also not dismiss you. So find those people who will talk. And when you talk and you reach out to other people, you start feeling better because you start realizing you're not alone. And loneliness is a really hard pill to swallow. So through this journey, if you want to reach out on our comments and this comment and things like that, we'll be watching. You can comment on any of our social medias. And we wish you well, and thank you, Kim, for sharing.
Thank you.
Until next time, everybody.